I'm Daphne Argueta, and welcome to GME Compass, where we take the complexities of GME and turn them into clarity. The APE is a required ACGME process that many programs find unclear, and it's because it's approached as a task to complete rather than a process to understand and use. This is around that time where programs start to prepare for this requirement. In this episode, we're going to define what an APE is, clarify what is required, and then outline a structured way to be able to approach it. And this is part of a 3-part series. So we have no financial disclosures, and any content that is shared by GME Compass is based on our own personal experiences in graduate medical education, and it reflects our personal insights. The perspectives that we share are our own, and they don't represent the views of any institution or organization that we are or have been affiliated with. Before beginning any ACGME related process, the first step is to review your specialty specific requirements. Each program has unique expectations. So while there are common standards, your specialty specific requirements serve as the primary source of truth. And this ensures that your approach is based on what is required and not based on assumptions, prior practice, or comparisons to other programs. In this episode, we're going to focus on 4 objectives. We're going to define what an APE is and why is it important. We will also identify what is required to complete an APE. We're also going to discuss what the program expectations are, and then finally discuss a clear and structured approach to the APE. The goal here is clarity and consistency in how the APE is understood and applied. The Annual Program Evaluation, or APE, is an ACGME requirement under the section of Program Evaluation and Improvement. Most programs treat the APE like a once-a-year task to just check off. But if you're doing it that way, then you're missing the point. Your APE should tell the full story of your program. Where you've been, where you are, where you're going next. At a high level, it requires programs to conduct an annual review of program data and then also develop action plans for improvement. In practice, the APE is your program structured self-assessment. It's where you're going to take a step back and evaluate how your program is actually performing. What is working well, where are the gaps, and what needs to change. The APE should reflect the previous academic year, because you're not only assessing that year's performance, but you're also reviewing prior action plans, what was completed and what wasn't and why. From there, you build your next set of action items, which then makes this a continuous cycle of evaluation and improvement. The APE is frequently misunderstood. It is not just a form to complete, and it's not just compiling a bunch or tons of data. And it's definitely not something that you want to leave to the last minute. And believe me, I've made all these mistakes. When the APE is approached this way, it turns into a rush. Again, check the box, one that feels overwhelming, disconnected, and then it ends up being difficult to sustain year after year. And then more importantly, you lose the value of the process. Because the APE is not about the document itself, it's about the evaluation that's behind it. So it's the reflection, the discussion, and then the decisions that come out of that review. When done well, the APE becomes a tool that helps you understand your program more clearly, intentionally, and then helps you to make data-informed improvements. The purpose of the APE is to support program improvement. It demonstrates that the program is actively reviewing its performance. It's using data to identify trends, make thoughtful and data-informed changes over time. This includes looking at outcomes, feedback, and key program metrics, and then using that information to guide decisions and set priorities in the future. So again, this is not a one-time annual task. This represents an ongoing cyclical process of evaluation, reflection, and improvement. It's how programs demonstrate that they are not just maintaining compliance, but they're also intentionally working towards evolving and strengthening over time. So if the purpose of the APE is for continuous improvement, what is the ACGME looking for? So the ACGME is looking for evidence that your program is reviewing its program data, that it's interpreting what the data is showing or what the data is showing. It's taking action to drive improvement. This is what demonstrates effective program oversight, and it shows that your program is not just maintaining compliance, but that, again, you're actively working to improve. The Program Evaluation Committee, or PEC, is responsible for conducting the APE. The PEC is responsible for reviewing program data, discussing key findings, and then they're also responsible for identifying strengths and areas for improvement, along with developing the program's action plans. So in practical terms, the APE is a direct reflection of the work of the PEC. So the APE doesn't exist in isolation. It is really part of a broader system of program evaluation and oversight. The PEC conducts the evaluation, which then drives the program's action plans. That work then is carried forward and reflected in the ACGME annual update and WebADS that we all have to do in September. At its core, the APE is how the program evaluates itself internally before then communicating its performance externally. So it connects to what your program is experiencing every day and how that story then is ultimately reported to the ACGME. So for example, let's say your ACGME survey results show that there are lower scores in area like feedback and workload. The PEC would then review that data. They would then discuss any contributing factors, and then they would identify that as an area for improvement. From there, the program develops an action plan, maybe implementing structured feedback sessions or working with clinical administration to adjust workflow. The same issue and the steps taken to address it are reflected then in the ACGME annual update in WebADS in September. So what you documented externally should always be grounded on what you're actually doing in the work that you're doing internally. The APE is conducted through the PEC, but the coordinator plays a very vital role in making that process work. Coordinators and managers are often the ones that are organizing and preparing the data for PEC reviews. They're identifying patterns, they're recognizing trends, and then flagging potential gaps early. They also help to keep the process on track. They're ensuring that the action items are being documented, that, timelines are followed, and that nothing is getting lost in between meetings. While the PEC leads the evaluation, the coordinators and managers are often the ones keeping the process structured, organized, and moving forward. So in practice, this may look different across programs, but there are common patterns. And some of those patterns are coordinators and managers are often the ones to prepare the data ahead of PEC meetings so that the discussions are more focused and meaningful and not just reactive. They create the structure around the APE process so it's not happening at the last minute. They document discussions and decisions clearly, so that way you can ensure that there's a consistent record of review. And one of the most important pieces is continuity. From one year to the next, coordinators and managers are often the ones who know what was done, what worked, what still needs attention. That continuity is then what turns the APE into a true cycle, and again, not just a one-time event. Common challenges in the APE process include over-documenting instead of focusing on what matters, waiting until the end of the cycle to start the work, reusing prior content without truly reassessing if it still applies, carrying forward old action items without again reevaluating progress or outcomes from those action plans, and then developing action plans that are vague and that are not actionable. A more effective approach to this is to keep the process focused, intentional, and ongoing. You can start by identifying the key data that truly reflects your program's performance. We'll talk about what is required, but this is an extra piece that you can also identify. Review that data regularly, not just once a year. You want to engage the PEC in meaningful discussions and not just documentation. And then develop action plans that are specific, measurable, and clearly tied to your findings. While also, you want to revisit your prior action plans to then assess impact and next steps. When you approach it this way, the APE becomes more manageable and far more valuable to your program. So the biggest takeaway from this episode is this. The APE is not something that you complete once a year. It is a continuous process that should be happening throughout the year. And it's not about how much data you include. It's about how clearly you understand what that data is telling you. The ACGME is not looking for volume or perfection. What they are looking for is evidence that your program, that you are reviewing your program and you understand and you're acting on its performance. And this is also where programs coordinators and managers play such a critical role in helping to bring that structure and consistency and that follow through to the process. When an APE is supported in this way, it becomes more manageable and sustainable over time. And then ultimately, it becomes a tool that supports program improvement and not just compliance. In the next episode, we'll focus on gathering data, like what truly matters, how to organize it in a structured and meaningful way, and how to focus on trends and not volume. So your review is both clear and actionable. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of. If this was helpful, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also follow GME Compass on Instagram and LinkedIn for more content like this. And we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and share what part of the APE process feels the most unclear and overwhelming right now. And we'll see you in the next one.